Welcome to the Even Better podcast, where your host, Sinikka Waugh of Your Clear Next Step, brings you exciting content about making communities better by helping people get even better at work. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I am so thrilled to have with us Robert Moore. Just an inspirational story to join. This is Sinikka Waugh with the Even Better podcast here on behalf of Your Clear Next Step. This is part of our ongoing mission to help people have better work days. And let me tell you what I know about Robert Moore. And Robert Moore is one of those folks who has a story to tell about better work days, because his work days were not great. And he was going through some motions and looking at work days in a way that I suspect some of our listeners out there were going through work days, and found a way to bust through some barriers in his own life. And as a multidisciplinary contemporary artist, he has really broken through the mold and is just a phenomenal artist who has found his own right. And I will let him tell you his story. And I am just so delighted to know him when, right? I get to say I knew him when we served together on the PMI board of directors way back when, and we were colleagues and contractors back in the project management space way back in the day before he was famous and an influencer and doing the amazing great work that he's doing today. Robert, thank you so much for making time to join us today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate that.
So you are from you're in the Des Moines area now. Are you originally from the Des Moines area?
Yeah, I'm born and raised, and I semi co-locate between California, Los Angeles a lot. I have a small studio out there too. But yeah, Des Moines is still my home base.
Des Moines is still home base, and it's where we met in the Des Moines area. So tell us a little bit, how do you introduce yourself today?
I usually introduce myself as B More because, Robert was my formal name, and Bobby is derived from shorthand of Robert. Growing up, my nickname was BJ, but a lot of my friends called me B. So when I started painting, I signed my artwork with a B and a dot and then my last name. So I kind of inherited this nickname that I actually had, but as part of my art identity too. And also a way to drop the formality of a world I was living in too. So it kind of all ties together.
So the idea of you are becoming more, you do more, you are more, you be more every day.
Yeah, there's some symbolism around it, and people also call me Robert Moore and B Robert Moore and just B. And so I'm not too restricted with that, but yeah, it's become my identity.
It's become your identity. So tell us a little bit, before we get into some of the podcast topics a little bit, tell us a little bit, because I think your story will help us understand the topic, because we're gonna get into a couple of topics today specifically derived from your story, and they're about the job and how allowing a job to have control over your mental happiness and having healthy outlets, those kinds of things. Those are topics that we're going to hit on today. Before we get into that, tell us, I alluded to it a little bit, but you've taken a journey from corporate America into this internationally known artist today. Can you just paint us a little bit of a picture of the independent artist, the path to that?
Yeah, so a real quick snapshot shot of my career. I started out in telemarketing when I was younger. Had a GED, even though I completed all 4 years at Johnston. I joined the military early and opted for a GED for early entry. And college really wasn't my thing. I think all along, fitting in a box, especially that young, unsure of what I really wanted to be when I grew up, was really just troubling for me. So I started out in telemarketing, did that for a while, and into my later 20s, got in some trouble and decided to get a big boy job, an adult job, and joined with a technology staffing company, and quickly was able to analyze and connect the dots between previous skill sets and roles I had to jobs that had higher requirements, but just reframed in the same skill set that I might have been doing in another service industry job per se. So I was able to translate that through understanding the tech space, and from a functional side, without any pedigree or any certifications, I was able to get an entry level, or actually it was actually a mid-level role as a project manager, which is where you and I kind of met around that time. So I was still trying to find myself. I thought getting a job that paid six figures was it. And project management, it pays good. It's also a lot of work. Still to this day, I take pride in the art side of project management. I still feel very confident if given a high level enterprise modernization or change effort, I could still lead that with success through relationships and the art of project management. But I failed the PMI test a couple times, and that was not, the science side was not for me. And again, trying to fit myself in a box. So fast forward, I encountered some challenges in some of the environments I was forcing myself in, and ultimately led to me becoming very heavily, which I always struggled with this, but heavily using and abusing alcohol and drugs. And that persisted for a while until I had to figure out a healthier habit, a hobby. And I had to do some root cause analysis. To be honest, I applied some of my skills to figure out why the heck I kept repeating this pattern and how to break the pattern and fix it. And that was really the root cause analysis. Once I got to the root, it took a lot of work to fix it. But part of that was replacing a bad habit with a healthy habit, because I realized having an idle mind was something that was not good for me either way. But I had to do something that wasn't going to hurt anybody else and was happy, something I enjoyed. So that's kind of where it all started, is just finding that thing that made me happy and was not hurting anybody else, including myself.
That's fantastic. Thank you. As we explore through this podcast episode today, we're going to talk about a couple things that you've learned in your journey and that you've offered to share with our listeners today. And two main nuggets, I think the two main nuggets that you've shared, and one of them's got some sub points to it. But one of them is the truth, especially as we're helping people have these better work days. The truth is that you learned not to allow your job to have control over your mental happiness. Or that there was truth that you were at some point allowing your job to have control over your mental happiness. Can you talk us through what that looks like in an unhealthy way and what it looks like when you're doing it right, which you clearly are doing it right now?
Yeah, so it's kind of like your cup is full of water. Mm-hmm. And how much of that water are you giving to the job, to yourself, and to your family? I guess that's really how I had to look at it. And this can be applied to anything. And so what I noticed was, you get hired at 40 hours a week, but you want to do a good job. You want to excel, and you want to get to that next level. And in order to do that in a 40-hour work week, given all the different circumstances, sometimes that's damn near impossible. So what often happens is there's either a lack of quality or there's overwork that's applied. And that cup of water ends up being uneven. So that 50% ends up being even higher that you would normally give to your job, and it ends up spilling into family and your mental health. And I think understanding that too, some people can do it. I'm not saying this is for everybody, but I think just trying to reflect and understand where your triggers are, where your stress points are, what do you look forward to during the week? Because one thing I think we often forget is we get these jobs to provide a better life for our families. And it happens so much, we allow these jobs to become a priority over our families. And ultimately, a lot of times end up causing problems within our families, which is so the reason why you actually get the job. It's just opposite. So I think understanding those things, and, not everyone's going to have unhealthy habits, but stress can cause unhealthy habits as stress relievers, and there's healthy stress relievers too. That can also be hobbies. It can also just be routines, physical fitness. A hobby doesn't have to be painting, but it can be something like planting or gardening or taking walks. There's a lot of things that you have to understand for yourself what makes you happy. If you don't have control over changing that job, ultimately, a lot of things that we don't want to admit to ourselves is what we think we love, we really don't. And we try to tell ourselves we love it. And sometimes that's okay because it gets us through. It's almost like a survival mentality, but it's also unhealthy because if you're not honest with yourself and you're doing something you truly don't love, there will be a crash point. There always is.
Yeah. So how are you getting through? What were you doing on to get through? Did you love project management? Did you love that space?
I think I loved some of the movement that was able to be made and some of the energy that was felt through some of those challenges and wins, because some of the challenges provided some of the coolest wins. And looking back at that, I realize that now. I can't say I loved it. And I don't think it's because of the role, the function. I think it was because of the environments and some of the leadership, which we often talk about in a lot of these roles. Is usually, how do we fix this? It's change the software, change the environment, switch up leadership. So I'm not crazy in saying this, but oftentimes it wasn't necessarily project management. That was probably one of my favorite jobs I've ever had as far as the function. I apply it a lot today in my own independent practice. A lot of us do it every day in a sense. But no, I think the way I was able to cope with it was to my demise, and it was through drinking. I was able to cope with it through drinking. I was also able to cope with it through fellowship and community internally with little pods and pockets of people that were struggling and going through the same thing, kind of just moan and complain circles. But it felt good because it was almost like AA. It was like, oh, I'm not the only one that has everything's in shambles. Yeah, those were the ways I coped with it. And looking back, therapy was something that I didn't necessarily have in my life that can help you get through things that you don't have control over. And when you get stuck in a spot, you sometimes aren't able to jump straight from it. So you have to work through finding different tools like therapy, like hobbies, like healthy things, outlets to help you get to that next stage where you can find your happiness and either change that role by having communication with your boss and your leaders about expressing your unhappiness within a strategic way because they're not your therapists and it can actually get you in trouble as far as your career. Yeah, so thinking about things like that, and I see a lot of people unhappy in their roles, and I think speaking up and understanding yourself and being prepared and really thinking through it before you even have those conversations too. So you're prepared to understand what you actually like and taking different classes to understand where you didn't have exposure to certain skills or trying new things is important too, because you never know what you're going to discover that you're going to say, this is magical.
So how did that happen for you in painting? Did you just put your brush to paper one day and go, "Oh my gosh, I'm amazing at this"?
I think a lot of us do it our whole lives. Some of us are more open, some of us are more closed. But we all, either through choice or force, have to try these new things and are put in different situations. And by doing that, we find new things we like, natural order. And so, me, I was always in constant pursuit of finding the next thing, not college educated. I was from a career to homes to things. And I've learned to slow down on that because I found my happiness. The pursuit of happiness is a real thing. You move through life sometimes so fast trying to find it, you can miss it. So you can't miss it. But once you find it, you can't ignore it. You have to water it and watch it grow. However, you have the capacity to. In the early stages for me in my sobriety and the counter sobriety was, or the counter of alcoholism was painting, was outside my number one job, which is being a dad. And so after my kids were asleep, I'd paint for 3, 4, 5 hours till 1, 2 in the morning. I'd go to bed for about 4 or 5 hours, wake up at 5 or 6 ish, paint for another hour, get them breakfast, get them ready with their mom. And that's how I was able to water and fuel my passion while also trying to figure out, I was almost racing towards this light saying, I think I found something I want to do. I have to put my all into it, even in the little time I have, because I'll never really know if I can make this a full thing if I don't. And that investment was exhausting. But within 6 months, I was able to say, based on what I've made over the last 6 months, which I actually wanted to wait a year, even longer, just to get true data, I could tell, I was like, I've made enough that if I put 100% of myself in, I should at least double this because I'm only putting 30% in now. So I gave myself some risk scale. So I said, I'm doubling my time. I'm tripling my time. I should at least double my income. And if I get all my time back, how much value is that to be flexible for my kids and stuff? So I literally line item that out to figure I can make half what I'm making now and do what I love. That was what it boiled down to. It wasn't about being richer. It was literally, I was like, I can do what I love, wake up when I want, get the kids, be flexible for them, do something I enjoy, and make half of what I'm making. That's cool. So that was the first thing that made me kind of move towards that. And then, scale and things like that after.
That's so amazing. And the listeners to this podcast don't have the benefit that I have right now because I can actually see your face and I can see you light up when you say do what you love, which is kind of the sub point about your job and the way it impacts your happiness. I've heard you say this multiple times now, do what you love. How do you know? What does that look like? What does it feel like? How do you know that you're doing what you love? I can see it on your face. I know that I'm doing it. What would you say to one of our listeners who was trying to figure out how do I know if I'm doing what I love?
Well, it won't cause you unhealthy habits or characteristics.
Okay.
If anything, the only byproduct, it could be a form of obsession, which could disrupt your personal life. But there's a lot of passion behind that. And most people will support that. And you'll also recognize it and be flexible with it. But that aside, it's a journey. So I think, thinking about when you were younger, thinking about your whole life as early as possible. Now with my kids, I instill in them, which was not instilled in me, to do what I love. And so figuring that out is a journey. I tell people often, if I was good enough to get paid to golf, I would be a professional golfer. I love golfing. I also love basketball, but I didn't grow up with a paintbrush or a golf club in my hand. And I was never as good enough at basketball to get paid to do it full time. And I won't even get into that. But yeah, I think, the art for me, for example, if you look at how you work in your own job, any job that you have, there's an art and a science. There's a practical application, there's a relationship, and then there's textbook. If you're more textbook, that means you're science. So then I can already put you in a box to say, these are the types of activities outside of work you probably enjoy because you're wired that way. You're not going to enjoy painting. It's going to be prescriptive and stressful for you. Most of my collectors are on the science side of their brain. I forget which side it is, left, right. But the art side for me is the creative side, which is more practical application, relationship, how to navigate the fluidity of movement in words and in people and things. So as a PM, I was really good on the art side. In martial arts, that was something I grew up with. So there was art there instilled in my life. So there was all these signals kind of point me towards art. I just didn't know how to put them together. So maybe just listening to yourself, trying to block out some of those unhealthy habits. And then most importantly, understanding where those unhealthy habits come from, because that's the greatest. I can't necessarily say how you know if you love what you do, but I can easier say how you know what you don't love.
Okay.
Like I can tell you what I don't love easier than I can tell you what I love because I haven't tried everything.
Okay. That's fair.
And the people that tell me that they don't love something indefinitely, I actually admire more because they've actually tried it. I don't know or sure or know without trying it is insane to me. So I think it's easier to look at yourself and figure out what you don't love and trying to eliminate and figuring out if those things that you're doing you don't love are impacting yourself or people you do love.
And you found that what was your realization that your habits, so I know that was the other topic, so the first topic that you wanted to cover was a job kind of controlling your happiness and making sure we're doing what we love, and the other topic was around your healthy or your unhealthy habits. Was it your habits? Was that what was the trigger for you or the wake up call for you that it was time to do something different?
Yeah, I was filling into my home life and I was, happy hour on Thursday, drinking on Friday, Saturday, hurting on Sunday, recovering, and then making Monday, which I already dreaded, even worse. And I've never been one of those I love Monday people. Shout out and respect to those people because they're absolutely special and they're a great asset to have on your team. I'm not one of those people and I never will be even today. And I love what I do. So I think just figuring out what you don't like. Yeah, just looking at what you're doing and being like, do I really love this? And we get trapped because we get on that corporate climb and we get so boxed in because of our income and our salary that we feel like we have no choice. That's where hobbies are important. Hobbies, I'm not telling everyone to jump off of a ship and start your own business or start sewing instead of your 6-figure corporate job. I'm saying balance your unhappiness, recognizing your unhappiness, balancing that with happy activities inside work and outside, taking walks, figuring out how to have appropriate breaks, communicating strategically with your leadership roles that you're not necessarily unhappy in, but being strategic about understanding your strengths by going to a strength finders class or a personality class, and understanding your personality and fitting that to a role. I think a personality fits better to a role than a skill set, because a skill set can be taught if someone actually fits the personality and would be happy in the job because it fits their personality. But a lot of these exams and tests and classes and programs are offered through corporate environments. So my advice would be to take advantage of those Clifton Strength Finders, those DISC tests, even those generational tests can help you understand yourself, your environments, and also dynamics between relationships between other coworkers and humans, which all play into your happiness and identity.
For sure. So in today's world, as you started to make your journey from corporate America into today as an independent artist, what are some of the habits that you formed today? What's your weekly routine, your daily routine as an independent artist?
It's kind of cool now because I worked really hard for that first year and a half, and I still work so hard, and I enjoy it. I get itchy if I can't paint. I used to paint every day. Sometimes 2 or 3 days will pass. But I'm a 50% dad, single parent. So I now have the luxury of every other week just being pretty much 100% dialed in and focused on being a dad, which does mean waking up, getting my kids ready, getting all their stuff ready, taking them to school, and then having the day where I usually do back office stuff. I'll communicate. I'll do some social media stuff. I might paint or sketch something, but I really don't paint with a dedicated focus until that off week, which then puts me at 50% of the year painting, making 5, 6, 7 times the amount I was as a high level program manager, only working 50% and giving my kids way more of myself, even though I only have them half the time. But when I have them, I'm giving them 200% of me. Yeah. So that's kind of my routine. Some days I don't even know what day of the week it is. I like that. I didn't like being so rigid in the corporate world. I, wear sweatpants and t-shirts a lot. And yeah, I don't necessarily have a routine. I have a team though. I have an assistant and I have a publicist and I have a management team that I staff and employ and pay for, who are an amazing asset. So we have weekly meetings and sometimes some daily touch points with them. And yeah, and then I have some delivery and logistical stuff that I do towards the end of the week with my assistant, sometimes in the middle of the week, depending on what projects we're working on. So it's very fluid though. And Mondays, my assistant sends me a sheet that just says what I have planned for the week. And that just gives me a guiding light to not be all over the place or take too many naps.
Not to take too many naps. So just enough structure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how about the subject matter for your art? How are you inspired? How do you choose what you're going to paint, what you're going to do next?
Well, part of my unhappiness was trying to feel like almost like a slave, wanting to get inside the slave owner's house and getting patted on the head and being a good boy because I made it in the house. My entire corporate career felt like that. And it doesn't necessarily mean there's any race reference there, but I have to apply it in that type of storytelling because my identity of my race, my experiences is heavily rooted in all my work, which has been a big part of my success because I've been able to connect with the global community that doesn't necessarily the makeup of a little bit less of a state dynamic and culture that Iowa provides globally, which has made me feel really good because I've been able to connect with people that understand my work and appreciate it and admire it. It makes sometimes having experiences that feel less diverse in a state I admire and love feel less worrisome because there's a balance of a love from a community that understands my identity globally. And that's been really nice. So a lot of my work's rooted in identity of nostalgia, iconography, the dichotomy of certain old works in Renaissance era versus new works or biblical references or race references or iconic media, and that can include cartoons to magazines. So I do a lot of that. I'm all over the place. And then there's a lot of personal stuff I also do that's more expressive and childlike that I don't post as much anymore because it's more like journaling. It's just become more private and I don't need to have it be out there necessarily for everybody. So sometimes I'll share some of those, but yeah, that's kind of what my subject matter is just my identity and authenticity. One of my bosses in one of my project management roles pulled me in the office and told me that they didn't think I was very authentic. And I've
Mm.
told this story before because I don't think, as a leader myself, I don't think the delivery of that message was packaged up correctly in sense of having compassion for human's feelings, and also for better context to understand what to do with that. Luckily, I was resilient enough, even though it hurt my feelings, to figure out what that meant to her and what that meant to me. And as much as it hurt, I couldn't deny the accuracy because I was doing something I didn't love because I was doing it in a place I didn't feel wanted nor belonged, etc.
Yeah.
So, man, a lot of my work is just raw and authentic because now I'm like, look, okay, you won't think I'm authentic. Let me show you the real me. And coming out of that shell helped me heal too. Helped me let go of those things that were making me unhappy because I was being someone I wasn't. So,
Yeah. So let me ask you this one last question. That wouldn't be the Even Better podcast if I didn't ask you this. What's making you even better these days?
what's making me even better? I have a lot of support from celebrities to highly influential and established art collectors to just friends and people in the community near and far that believe in me. And I'm only getting started. This much success in 2 years really just shows me I'm a data person. So it just gives me the data to feel like I'm even scaling back with a slower momentum, but still a steady focus with strategy and plan without publicizing everything gives me the confidence to know. And I worked so hard and built so much up that, and still living somewhat conservatively, that I have a lot of buffer to not be so pressed to work as hard, work smarter. And so that's where it comes from in my kids. So really just that community giving me the courage and the support and even the advice from people I admire that, to master my craft is advice that has no time limit on it. So I can do something I love forever.
Forever.
And yep, golfing and a couple other things I looked at when I got into golfing. I was like, what do I see older people doing that they can still do that they love? And I was focused on picking up something and trying to figure out how to love it. And I still love golf and I hope to golf until I'm old. But I also feel very confident I'll be able to paint given any physical hindrances throughout my, aging, which is exciting. So I can master my craft forever, which is freedom for me.
Oh,
So
that's beautiful. Robert, thank you so much for taking time today. I'm just so grateful for you sharing a bit of your story. And if our listeners want to learn more about you, bybemore.com is the best way to reach you. Is that right?
yeah, or at by Be More on Instagram
Okay,
is also cool.
excellent. All right. Well, thanks for your time. And to all our listeners today, thanks so much for joining in. If you missed the beginning of this, jump back to the beginning and don't miss the very beginning of our time together today. And on behalf of all of us here at Your Clear Next Step, we hope the rest of your day is even better.
Thank you for tuning in today. The Even Better podcast will be back with more content soon. But in the meantime, subscribe to our podcast or check out our website at yourclearnextstep.com for more information. See you next episode.